Welcome to tonight's conversation as part of our Pharmacy 360 program, which is focusing on the element of movement and exercise. We are going to be inviting Kate McDaid on tonight. She is a high performance nutrition coach and consultant. She runs her business in Dublin. I'm just going to get her online here. To continue our movement and exercise module. And last week we had guests from Dr. Robert Kelly, the cardiologist, and with Orla Hopkins as well, who is a fitness coach. So tonight there's Kate there.
Hey, how are you?
It worked.
Great. Always a sigh of relief.
Honestly, it's the hardest part. So we're good to go now. I was just introducing you there, and we're so thrilled to have you because obviously we're focusing. Pharmacy 360 is all about lifestyle health and how we can educate ourselves more. And what I love about tonight's chat is that we're kind of tying two of our elements, our physical activity and movement module, but also it's going to tie in nicely to nutrition because you do both.
Yeah, no, my remit would be, absolutely supporting those with their health and performance through nutrition. So hopefully I can lend some nuggets this evening.
Yeah, you will, I'm sure. And just if you'd like to explain your background, like your training that led you to where you are now, because you've had quite a journey, haven't you?
Yeah, no, it's been a decent one now, to be fair. I suppose my first introduction to nutrition was through sport. So as a teenager, I played a lot of basketball in particular. So I would have been introduced to nutrition on different teams I was on. So that is where I first got the insight that it was doing something positive and useful and it was worth paying attention to. And I actually then got to experience a bit of shadow work with the nutritionist when I was in fourth year transition year, and that sealed the deal because I was kind of opened up to nutrition in the context of the general public, and I found it fascinating still. So I was like, okay, there's something in this. So as I mentioned, I come from a sporting background, so
I
I've
think
had
you're being a
the
bit modest there, because there's some international involvement, wasn't there?
yeah, I've had the privilege of playing basketball for Ireland and then
Well
in more
done.
recent years playing football for Dublin. So it's
Brilliant.
something that I've kind of kept with over the years and modified in line with my life, but definitely sport and staying active has been a huge part of it all. Um so yeah, and it's helped shape, I suppose, what I do today. In terms of it, my work in the kind of nutrition space, yes, it's working with athletes, but also supporting individuals with their own kind of health and performance goals, as well as supporting corporate teams and entities with their workplace well-being, and
That's
supporting them through
actually what I was
nutrition.
just about to ask you is what type of people use your service? Like what are your most common clients, or is it a really wide variety?
Yeah, it is quite a wide variety. Like, I mean, I've worked in elite and amateur athlete and amateur teams and with amateur athletes as well. I've also worked with sports scholars through different scholarship programs. But then I also have this great mix of individuals who want to improve their health overall, and I suppose their performance in the context of day to day, getting the most out of themselves and what they're doing and what they kind of tackle with day in, day
Yeah.
out, as well as that kind of corporate space. So I'd work with, yeah, a number of
Sorry,
those guys too.
brilliant. Yeah, and we kind of just wanted to tell anyone listening that, as well as, you do work with elite athletes, but tonight we're going to really bring it back to the everyday person.
Yeah,
We're trying to get people motivated to go out and exercise. And, you know, fueling our bodies correctly is so important, because I mean, if you put diesel in a petrol car, it wouldn't go very far.
No.
So, if you want to maximize output and feel good and feel like you have the energy to get up and put your runners on in the first place, or roll out the yoga mat in the first place, or whatever it may be, that's where you're going to kind of come in with a few great tips, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, look forward to getting into it now.
Yeah, like when you see the kind of more day-to-day person, whatever their goal may be, like everyone's is different. What do you think the most common barriers are when it comes to changing nutrition habits or exercise habits? Like, what are, can you offer any tools that people could use to try and implement changes, even small changes, into their everyday life?
Yeah, I think with nutrition, particularly, it can seem quite, it can be overcomplicated. A lot of times there's a lot of information. It can be very overwhelming to kind
Hmm.
of figure out, okay, what direction should I be going in? A lot of conflicting information and the like. So, I really think bringing it back down to basics, and like being super clear on the direction you want to go in. I suppose what you're looking to achieve, but also not being afraid of. I suppose small steps. Like, we don't need these massive 180 changes a lot of the time, I think, and they can be quite difficult to achieve. Nutrition is one facet of well-being of your health, and it's an important one, and we definitely want to capitalize on it as best we can. And there's a lot of value in doing so. But we have to appreciate our starting point, and that's going to influence, I suppose, just how much attention and just how much change we can manage at any one go. So I think not being afraid of those kind of small steps
Yeah.
is really important, because very often we feel like, oh God, everything needs to change. I need to cut out X, Y, and Z, when actually, maybe positioning that a little bit more differently. There might be areas to work on for sure, but maybe let's go about it in the manner of, okay, well, what am I missing? What can I
Yeah.
add in, instead of panicking over all
Yeah.
of the things that you feel need to go?
And it could be something as simple as hydration. Like, are you drinking water? Because if we're
Exactly.
dehydrated, we're craving salty foods, and we can reach for the snacks and the ultra processed foods, and the kind of things we know deep down aren't going to fuel us the best.
Exactly. And I think, and with that said, like, I mean, we certainly don't want our diet to be made up of, foods that aren't overly nutritious, that aren't nutrient rich. But including them here and there is absolutely fine. And that's
Yeah.
often something that we think, oh God, health equates to maybe misery. Well, it doesn't need
Yeah.
to be. As you said, like, it might be the simple change of, God, my hydration's a little bit off. um, the benefit I can get from improving that would be better concentration, improved energy levels, and support with my digestion. And the list goes on. And that's
Mhm.
one tiny change before we get into you focusing on, you know, touching the food even,
Yeah.
so definitely to keep an eye on those easy wins for sure.
And if you had a client, say, that was, really not used to exercising in the past and doesn't have much kind of health literacy or understanding of like what nutritious food is, to really like offer, like, I presume you can offer advice and tie in nutrition and exercise side by side. So if you could give an example maybe of something somebody could do in the morning that would involve movement but also something nutritious, what would be a good example of that?
That's a good question. So I suppose my remit wouldn't be the exercise element per se, like but um, certainly, like, I from an overall health perspective, like even just getting out for a bit of daylight, and
Yeah.
now the mornings, thank God, are getting brighter, so that's that can be a really positive one, because getting out for that daylight, that can support your sleep even later on in the day and the quality of your sleep, but even, you know, a bit of fresh air and also that movement. It doesn't need to, again, be anything chaotic. And that might be maybe walking if you're, you know, relying on public transport or anything like that. It might be even just walking to the bus stop, or, you know, but making sure that that's part and parcel. Or it might be walking, like I have an exact 10 minute walk about the block. So if I didn't get out as early as I planned, you know, that's kind of my fallback.
Yeah.
So that'd be one thing. But the other side of the coin, then from a dietary standpoint, and I suppose where my expertise really would come in, would be, um, you know, it could be something like, you know, breakfast time, even if we're having that cereal in the morning, like even looking to maybe add some berries with that, or if we're having that slice of toast, can we maybe throw a little bit of yogurt on top of it, like a Greek yogurt or Icelandic yogurt? So it's really those like small tweaks. Or if we don't leave the house having anything to eat, but you know, our opportunity thereafter means that we're relying on something that's maybe more convenient, not overly nutritious. Well,
Mhm.
then it's maybe saying, okay, well, what is available to us in the house that might be more nutritious, that we could maybe look to incorporate into the scenario. So it really
Yeah.
depends on the individual. But you know, you mentioned someone who maybe isn't overly familiar with or maybe hasn't had the opportunity to look at this really before. So um, simple measures like the added bit of fruit, even, or maybe taking a piece of fruit full stop, that might be the win.
Yeah.
So you know, you probably look at that.
And it's
Um,
more economical as well, because I know if you get caught out and your only choice is like you know, in a shop that maybe has a deli counter, and there's not, like, it's very hard to avoid the fried foods there, and you know, it's really not something you'd want to be doing too often, you know, from a health point of view. It's not like it's, if you can try to be a little bit more prepared, I think, you know, if you buy a bag of oats and you can do overnight oats the night before, or quickly make some porridge and bring it in with you if you have a microwave in work, or, you know, and as you say, adding your berries, adding your fruit, adding a spoon of peanut butter if you like that,
exactly.
and adding fiber, you know, all these little good things, but to really change the mindset and think about adding as opposed to, I'm not allowed this, I'm not allowed that. That's going to really help people, I think.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a nicer way to certainly look at things, and also with even more impact. I feel like often when we think of our health and our diet, usually you'll probably start thinking about like that restrictive element
Mhm.
where, you know, even if you are rocking up to the deli, because again, depending on what makes sense for your next step, even like, you know, a wholemeal wrap versus a regular white wrap for, you know, to improve the fiber as you mentioned,
Yeah,
or adding some salad to, you know, that sandwich that you're opting for. So
yeah,
easy wins.
exactly.
Um, no matter how small, it's all a step in the right direction. And over time, those little percentages compound and leave you in a much better position.
Yeah,
And again, you're going to be the sum, or your success is going to be influenced by what you're doing consistently, what you're doing more times than not. So
yeah.
we want to try and get the more times than not in a good place as best we can.
Yeah. When it comes to actually somebody doing a workout, like we might just have a chat about kind of a pre-workout option of food, you know, something that's
Mhm.
really gonna keep them going, keep them energized, but not like be too heavy on the stomach. Because a lot of people are afraid to eat before they go to a gym class or work out too much.
Yeah, so I think depending on what exercise is at hand. So it's if it's something like quite intense, you know, whether you're going to a gym and it's kind of interval or hit training, or, you know, or maybe if it's something in that vein, I suppose, where you're demanding a lot from yourself, well then, you know, timing is certainly something to look at. So maybe, you know, having that kind of your last meal, and of course this will be influenced by the time of the day, but maybe trying to have your last meal 2 to 3 hours before. This is going to be quite individual to each of us,
Yeah.
but you know, looking to include some carbohydrates, some protein in that is going to be key. We don't want it, so I suppose to look at that, you're looking at your your poultry or your lean beef, or maybe some fish for your protein source. And then from a carbohydrate source, we might look at something like our brown rice or some potato, or again, maybe it's looking at a wrap, depending on where we're at in the day, or it could be oats. And we mightn't go so heavy with something like fat, which can slow the rate of digestion. So that might be something to be mindful of. But if it's a morning session, and we don't want to compromise on the session, and train without having anything, well, then you really are just going to pare back to, well, I have a short window of time here. I don't really have time to get a bowl of porridge and to cover
an
a
hour
meal off as such.
before.
Exactly, because
Yeah,
we can all do our best to get up early, but we don't need to be adding in an extra few hours. Sleep's important too.
yeah,
So even something there like a banana,
yeah,
high carbohydrate, easy to digest. Or maybe this is actually where something less nutritious can come into the fold, like a cereal bar. But again, it's serving a purpose. It's high carbohydrate, easy to digest, carbohydrate being the main fuel source for high intensity exercise. As we start to look at maybe the lower intensity side of things that aren't, or kind of low to moderate, timing, you have a bit more flexibility there. You also have a bit more flexibility with maybe your food choices, but you're probably looking to still include, carbohydrate and some protein there
and
as
if
well.
it's like somebody going for a run, you're kind of always have that fear of you'll get caught out away from a toilet during your
Oh
run. So
God.
the fear of that prevents a lot of people from eating before, but then you could get low blood sugar during the run. So what's your advice around that? It's just kind of what you said there.
Yeah, I think there is an element of trial and error. So
Mhm.
learn from what works well, and also learn from what isn't working, or what didn't work. So I always
Yeah,
think that's worth, that kind of feedback loop is super important, because um we don't want to keep finding ourselves in a negative
yeah,
situation, because if we're training, like, I mean, training's a really important aspect of your health, irrespective of what level you're at, what starting point.
absolutely.
And it should, some days, it's going to feel like hell. You just won't be in that mood. If I was trying to train, yesterday I was not in the mood, and it was just a case of like getting it done, that kind of
Yeah.
way. So of course that's part and parcel with life, but by and large it should be something that, like, you enjoy and that you feel comfortable doing. So we,
And you feel
the
great afterwards. I think the reward after is just such, like the endorphins are all released. If we could just bottle that up, I don't think anyone ever wouldn't exercise,
exactly.
so we can try to reframe our mind, like exercise is like medicine. I mean, people are always saying, like, what can I take and what can I do to kind of keep my health right? But actually exercise, to look at that as medicine, is powerful.
Exactly. No, and absolutely. And I don't think there's ever been, someone to regret that session,
Never.
again, irrespective of what was at hand. So I suppose it's just maybe recognizing that, something like our diet can really have a positive impact on how much we're getting from that session, how well we feel in that session. And often what's very rewarding from my side is when you're working with someone who maybe hasn't really looked at it, or maybe didn't know how to go about changing their diet in line with the exercise that they're doing. And when you start to tweak that and they reap the rewards, like I had someone recently there who didn't even realize how much they were under fueling and going into their sessions. So even tweaking that, and then them to come back to say, oh my god, my energy levels were so much better, and like I was able to push so much harder, and all that is so rewarding. And I always say, again, irrespective of who's in front of me, if you're going to go and do the donkey work of your training, you might as well get extra bang for buck. And the extra bang for buck is coming from your diet, it's coming from your sleep, it's coming from your hydration. So it's another way to reward yourself and really amplify that fabulous feeling that you get after you
Yeah.
finish.
I see a question just came in there. Somebody just missed it. for the food that you recommended pre-run, if you're going for a long distance run, the number one was really banana.
Well, that can be a good shout for sure. So I think I mean, if we're going for a long run and we're going to be out for, again, depends, 45 an hour, maybe it's 2 hours. I don't know what long is looking like for this
Yeah.
specific question. But we definitely want to make sure that there's some carbohydrates on board. So if it is an early morning session and you know have a short gap to get something on board, that's where something like a banana or a cereal bar, something that's high carbohydrate, easy to digest, could be an easy win. But I'd
Hmm.
also look, if it is a long run, you know, probably no harm in looking to a bit of fueling the night before as well.
Yeah.
So if it's over that kind of hour mark, you know, getting some extra carbohydrates in the evening before to help you prepare when you know you don't have much room to fuel that morning would be a good idea too. And indeed, if it's, you know, pushing out over an hour and a half, well, then we'll probably need to look at a little bit more than the night before to feel that run successfully.
Hmm.
But carbohydrates would be the head honcho for
Yeah,
those
and
long runs and to
so
fuel
many
you.
people just get with exercise, just think it's all about protein, but the carbohydrate is so important, isn't it?
Carbohydrate is key for fueling high intensity exercise for sure. So the longer the session, so a long run here, the longer the session, the higher the intensity and the higher the frequency, carbohydrates become more and more important. So again, I suppose depending on where you sit on that, or you know the level that you might be training, will influence just how much they are how much of a role they will play.
Yeah.
But certainly they're really important. The kind of more active we are and the greater demand we're putting on our body. But
Yeah.
protein certainly does have a role for sure as well,
Yeah.
from a recovery standpoint.
It's
And
really
you know,
about
recovery is an important
balance as
facet.
well, isn't it? Like, we're not, all the food groups have their place. I think that's just really important to remind everybody that we're like, it's never just one or the other. And when we think about whole foods, like, that haven't been kind of milled over and over, they actually already contain a nice mix, a lot of them
Yeah.
naturally.
Uh,
So it's to really trust nature in that case as well.
1,000,000%. Like, I mean, we touched on fat a little bit, but you know, again, again, irrespective of, you know, what kind of training you have at hand, your health is the foundation for all of us. And the healthier we are, the better we're going to perform anyway. But each of those nutrients all have a role to play in their own right. And then depending on, I suppose, the training demands at hand will influence, you know, maybe how much of each we might need, but they all for sure are playing a role
Yeah,
in
and
our
that's why they're
performance.
called essential nutrients at the end of the day as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
just a final question about the pre-workout kind of fuel. A friend of mine she loves swimming, and if she had a swimming tournament coming up, say on a Saturday, and she knows it's going to be a really long day, how far back in days would you recommend that she like starts to kind of carb load, or really, like, should she lighten her meals coming up to it, or what would you recommend for that type of performance? And I could probably go for people, say, with a match on a Saturday morning, if it's a team sport where, again, the morning could be, say if it's early, they don't want to eat something heavy. So, like, would it be a couple of days before, or is it really that night before that's most important?
You're probably looking at somewhere in around the 36 hours before where we start to ramp up the carbohydrate intake, you know, anything for talking and along the lines of something, you know, marathon based, you know, which again is another element of, or, you know, a key element within endurance, that you might push it out 48 hours. But that maybe 24, 36 hour window for something like a football match you mentioned there, or
Mhm.
again, the tournament, depending on how much demand, or I suppose what discipline within swimming and how often that, you know, should be racing and whatnot, will influence her preparation. But you know, you'd be looking at more than the night before in that respect, to
Mhm.
increase carbohydrate intake. And just for anyone who maybe might be familiar with that, you know, as I mentioned, uh after, for anything that's kind of high intensity and over the kind of hour, 90-minute mark, you're looking to make sure, well, that you're starting that with adequate energy stores. So we're looking to make sure that our stored form of carbohydrate, which is glycogen, is maximized going into that. And then during prolonged exercise like that, then we'd actually be looking to introduce carbohydrate within that. But I suppose the reason why you would carb load, as you mentioned there, Liz, would be to maximize those glycogen stores.
Yeah, like fill up
With
your
our
petrol tank before a long journey.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And then, so you've done your workout, you feel amazing, you're high on endorphins. What sort of like food would you recommend for post workout? So we're kind of thinking about repairing our muscles, ensuring a good recovery, trying to prevent injury, that sort of thing. And like we don't want to think just only for like the marathon runners, but like starting with the everyday person that's gone to a gym class and they're only new enough to exercise in, but they don't want to be in bits and they think they're going to be very sore for the next 2 days after. Is there food that they can eat that will help
Yeah.
in their repair of their muscles?
Yeah, well, I think in the case of the gym, someone new to the gym, um, to kind of minimize, I can't say that there's anything specifically that is going to negate that kind of DOMSy feeling or that soreness that we've all experienced at some point, which is sometimes like it's an enjoyable kind of
Good thing.
marker progress, yeah. But definitely to minimize it. Something like protein would be absolutely something to consider in that
And
instance.
is
So that
there
would be like
a
your,
time frame you should consume it by? Because I've heard different things over the years.
yeah. So again, it really boils down to the context in terms of the frequency of training, the training at hand, and the intensity of it. And I suppose when your next session is going to be. But if you've got more than kind of the 48-hour mark between sessions, and you're relatively new to the scene, like I'd always, if you can get something in within the hour, 2 hours at a push, you won't be too far astray.
And what
Um,
are the best for people that don't really know what, like they know what a protein bar looks like, but from a whole food point of view, if you could just give a few examples of easy to reach for protein sources.
yeah, so like dairy, eggs, your poultry, fish, like tuna is a convenient option to have at hand. Um, then they would probably be the high quality options. I know
Yeah.
you mentioned
Greek yogurt is
protein.
actually delicious as well. It's so creamy, and again, you can add your berries, you can add your seeds, your maybe a handful of nuts. You're gonna add loads of fiber in there as well, and good fats too.
Yeah, absolutely. So something like that can be a great shout. Um, so that any of them would be good options for anyone maybe more plant-based requirements. Like, you could look to get support from maybe a protein powder, or you could look at things like, your beans or your chickpeas and lentils and the like. I suppose the more of a mix of plant source you can get, the better it'll aid your recovery, so that you're getting I suppose a complete profile, or your body's getting, I suppose, all the building blocks within those proteins to support its muscle growth and its recovery.
Yeah, brilliant. And what about if you say we're going for a long hike at the weekend and you want to pack some snacks to bring along? What are your kind of go-to things that you would grab and love to have in your backpack?
Yeah, I always think like things. Well, I have a few recipes that I always fall back on, like energy balls, and I've got cocoa banana bites or protein balls that I might make. I think trail mix is an easy one that's available to all of us. Some fruit, depending on how long I'm gone for, how I've timed it. A decent sandwich never goes amiss either
Yeah.
when you reach that point. So I think anything along those lines uh, can be a nice shout. Something to kind of keep hunger at bay, support energy levels, and that tastes delicious.
Yeah, because it's all enjoyable too. Like it should be lovely, and you look forward to it. And I suppose hydration is so important in that respect as well. Like for people to remember to pack their water bottle, and just on the hydration note as well, if somebody is sweating an awful lot from their activity,
Mhm.
sometimes you can get a little bit off balance with electrolytes. And like in every pharmacy, you'll find diorolite, which people think is only for after diarrhea, but it's actually brilliant for recovery if you've had a really high intensity workout, to just help to rebalance your electrolytes again. And there's loads of different brands now if you don't like the taste of diorolite, like ORS and lots of other ones popping up, and that most pharmacies have a selection of now.
Yeah, I think electrolytes again, like you mentioned there, in terms of those of us who might be sweating a lot, or again, depending on the demand and the nature of the activity at hand. So that certainly will influence, like we lose electrolytes, particularly sodium, through our sweat.
Mm.
Oh, when we're exercising for, well, we can lose it anyway, but when it has significant value, I suppose is influenced by how long we're exercising for. And
Mm.
obviously now, as we start to broach into the nicer weather,
Yeah.
and when it gets hotter, that's gonna happen. Yeah, and thank God.
Yeah.
It was so nice to see sunshine today. But that will certainly have an impact on whether we need it or not. But yeah, so context dependent, I would say, for that one for sure.
The next question I've got here for you is, do you have any practical tools to help people be accountable to like positive habits they're trying to create around their nutrition? So say if they're trying to follow a diet, but they failed in the past and their self-confidence level might not be too high. Like, as your kind of coach approach, like how would you help guide someone and reassure them that, look, you've got this and this is how you can be accountable?
Yeah. I think, okay, so with that, and we mentioned maybe a feedback loop earlier on. So this is another example of that feedback loop. Like, take note of, what's worked and what hasn't in the past, and like use that to your advantage. I mentioned we don't need to operate in the extreme, so don't feel like that's the way you need to go about business. And if you've tried that before and it's failed, it's telling you something there. So I think, accountability, maybe you might have a similar goal to someone within your household or a friend of yours, and even supporting your health, maybe that could be, and I'm just thinking of myself and my husband here, if it would be, make looking to cook from scratch one day a week, for example, and make sure there's veggies and a high quality protein
Yeah.
source in that meal. So
Could
doing
be,
it with someone can help.
yeah, I was just thinking as well, it could be lovely to introduce into the workspace as well, like with colleagues,
Yeah.
because I'm sure there are people that are, shy, but workspaces, I know in the pharmacy, we can be devils for for the being sweet treats around. But like all it would take for someone to kind of go in and have like rice cakes, nuts, peanut butter, bananas, a few healthy options there as well that are lovely and tasty, and to encourage each other and maybe create the conversation around it. And it only takes one person to start that conversation, and I'm sure you'd find that lots of people actually like, oh, I want to be try to improve my health, but my cholesterol's a bit high, or I actually started a gym class and I feel like I'm undoing my good work because there's so many sweets here around me I can't resist. It's hard to resist them.
Yeah, I think your environment massively shapes your success from a habit standpoint. So I think, yeah, the more you can kind of get those around you on the same page, the easier life will be,
Yeah.
for sure. So even maybe that's like trying a new healthy snack recipe, and you bring that maybe into the staff room, versus picking up maybe the usual go-tos that aren't, the most nutritious of
Yeah.
options. That could be for sure an option. The other thing that's useful is like habit stacking. So that's if you're trying to incorporate something new, um, pairing it with something you're already doing. So like hydration's come up quite a lot. So say if you were looking to improve your hydration, and sorry, one thing maybe to flag, just because people are like, how do I know if I need to improve my hydration? A really easy and clear tool is, your urine. It's not glamorous or by any stretch, and not necessarily my favorite topic of conversation, but if that's a pale yellow color, you're doing a good job. And this is, sorry, over the course of the day. If it's a deep yellow, dark color, aside from my breakfast or morning time, I'll let you away with that.
Yeah.
But certainly over the course of the day and pre-exercise, we probably have a little bit of work to do. So
Hmm.
so going back to that habit stacking piece, you might say, okay, well, I want to improve my hydration because I'm probably a little bit off. And I have breakfast every morning. So before I finish my breakfast, I want to have a glass of water taken on board. So that's pairing a new habit or what you're looking to create with the something that's already
Yeah.
there, and that can be super helpful.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Just if someone is injured or recovering from injury, do you like what advice would you have with regards to nutrition? Are there certain things they can eat that will help them repair, or is it back to the protein conversation again?
Yeah, protein definitely can help because it depends on the injury, but protein's the background of all the cells in the body, and it'll help minimize the loss of muscle, which again, all of us have muscle. It's our healthy tissue. We want to hang on to it. So that's definitely going to be an important factor. I think like the more nutritious your framework is from a dietary standpoint, the more it's going to help with actually your recovery, and things like omega threes have anti-inflammatory properties that can help from an injury standpoint. So that would be through like your oily fish, for example,
And if you didn't
antioxidant.
like fish, if someone didn't like fish, their omega-3 supplements might be an option for them then.
Yeah, so if you mightn't like fish, or maybe you're just like don't really get the opportunity to have it over the week. So if you're in either of those categories where you're not consuming two or more portions of oily fish a week, then absolutely something like a supplement would definitely be useful on that front for an
Hmm.
omega-3 for sure. Other things like fruits and vegetables, they're like packed full of antioxidants, and which is going to help as well. Your garlic, your turmeric, and so on can support the cause. So again, looking to get those foods, that are packed full of nutrients that are going to help that recovery,
Yeah.
is really important. And even actually hydration to help remove toxins and stuff in the body is also useful too from a
Brilliant.
recovery standpoint.
And you have a couple of recipes on your website, don't you? So, for people that are listening, I like NutriKate. It's Kate McDaid, but your Instagram handle is NutriKate_com, isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm sure there's a link to your website there, and you do have a couple of recipes that look lovely on the website. So if people do want to check that out after, do like it's lovely to get new ideas, and especially when you've created them and with all your experience, I'm sure they're great.
Yeah. Thank
Um,
you.
and then any other supplements that you'd recommend people to take, or how
Uh,
do you feel about that? Or
Yeah, so supplements, there's definitely it can be a place for them. It's going to depend on your starting point, and it's very much from my perspective, trying to get as much as you can from foods
yeah,
first, and then it's when that's kind of falling short in line with our needs, well, then we'll look to supplement. I think, for me, we mentioned like omega threes and the context in which they can be used. That's generally one that I tend to recommend because a lot of us aren't meeting our needs in that respect.
yeah,
Vitamin D is another one over the winter period. So vitamin D super important for our bone health, immunity,
hmm
our overall well-being, and it's something that we get predominantly from the sun. So over the winter months, October to kind of March here in Ireland, it's probably a good thing to look at supplementation. And then something like a protein powder can be useful if we're falling short from a dietary standpoint, or maybe there's just pockets of the week that you might struggle. So it can be
yeah.
a nice backup tool
It can
to
be quite a
help.
convenient way as
Exactly.
well to ensure you're getting it. If you're on the run and you're going from gym to work, or you just literally don't have time to cook yourself a nice nutritious meal, it can be quite a handy go-to
Ex-
alternative. Yeah,
Exactly. Or, and even just to help improve the nutrients and diversity within a meal as well. So say porridge, for example, carbohydrates, and oats is a great source of carbohydrates. But if you're looking to bump up the protein, yes, milk will help, but also to get extra bang for buck, a scoop of whey can be really useful in that context to help with the balance side of things with that meal.
yeah.
So
And
definitely
the
a time and
type
a
of
place.
proteins, does that matter massively, or You mentioned whey protein there.
Whey protein. So that's a high quality protein source. It's high in an amino acid, which are the building blocks of protein, called leucine, which is like key in, say, muscle protein synthesis or like growth. So that's going to be important from a recovery standpoint for those of us who are active. But with that said, plant-based options, if they fall in line with, if you're vegan, or maybe your preference is that there, there's some great options on the market as well. So
Yeah.
that also will do the job.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's a variety of plant-based proteins. I think if you can kind of keep your diet nice and varied, as you said earlier, if you're plant-based, things like lentils, chickpeas, beans, it's really convenient. You can buy them in tins. They're very good value as well, to add to your meal. From an economical side of things,
yeah.
they can be brilliant options, and you're not like missing out on essential
Yeah.
nutrients.
Yeah, I think the key thing that you said there is like getting a mix of sources. So
Yeah.
again, to make sure that you are getting everything that you need there, and also plant-based sources tend to be lower in protein versus maybe animal-based sources, which is grand. So that's why if we get a mix of things like the legumes, or your beans, your chickpeas, or even things like quinoa and the likes,
Yeah.
and mixing those sources together in a dish, it all bumps up and helps you meet your needs a bit more effectively that way.
Brilliant. Well, I had some questions that people sent in, but honestly, we've covered everything, I think. Yeah, you just literally touched on everything as we went along. So I really hope people enjoyed tonight. It's been a wealth of knowledge. And if people want to get in touch, do you want to tell them anything about your the service you offer?
Yeah, so I guess, there's one-to-one support that I offer through nutricate.com, and there's a link in my bio as well on Instagram. A lot of my I suppose what would like insights I'd share through Instagram is probably where I'm most active. Or if you're involved in like sports teams or gyms or corporate settings, and you feel like nutrition support is needed,
Yeah.
again, you can contact me on here or through nutricate.com.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for joining in and for the questions that came in as well. I hope you all enjoyed. And yeah, have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thanks
Thank
so
you so
much.
much, Kate. Bye bye.
Thanks a million.
You're
Bye.
welcome.